So I was in Nashville this last week visiting some priest buddies. We all kind of came from our respective places, hadn't seen these guys in years. It was a really good time. And inevitably, we were trying to figure out where we were going all the time because none of us had been to Nashville. And my buddy who had driven there, every time we'd get in the car, he would say, "Quo vadis," which was kind of a fun thing because it's a play on a story I'll tell in a minute. But it's a Latin phrase meaning, where are we going? That's a good question for if you're trying to get around Nashville, but probably also a very deep and powerful question for the spiritual life. Where are we going? It's interesting because in this gospel reading we just heard, Peter says he's going fishing. And if you remember, there's another story that involves Peter and others, like the sons of Zebedee, going fishing. And at the end of that story, they have a miraculous catch of fish, and Jesus tells them to go follow him. And they leave their nets and follow Jesus. Here we are, post-resurrection. We've heard in this very gospel reading, this is the third time Jesus has appeared to his disciples after the resurrection. And Peter still went back to his nets. How often in the spiritual life have I had an experience, maybe it was a retreat, maybe it was a good confession, who knows what kind of experience you've had, maybe even a frightful scare that said, okay, I am never going back to this thing, this way of life, this person or situation, whatever. Never going to touch that again. And then like 2 minutes later, where are we? Where are we going? This is a tremendous story in the context of everything else too, because like we heard in the first reading, Peter and John suffer dishonor for the sake of the name, and they rejoice in it. Once they've received the Holy Spirit at Pentecost, they're filled with this new vigor in life, and they're rejoicing for suffering for the sake of Christ. Because remember, all beforehand, like throughout the Gospels, Peter is absolutely terrified of crucifixion. When Jesus predicts that he will die and rise after 3 days, Peter says, "No, Lord, quit talking like that." And Jesus calls him Satan. Think also to a different charcoal fire that night before the crucifixion, where Peter is warming himself by a charcoal fire and ends up denying Christ 3 times because he knows if he's associated with Jesus and Jesus gets crucified, that's the same fate he might have to undergo. So here, in this gospel reading we just heard, Jesus has breakfast next to a charcoal fire and then asks Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" Interesting. 3. I don't know if you caught that. So Peter has this experience of post-resurrected Jesus. He has the experience of the Holy Spirit coming upon him at Pentecost and boldly suffering and rejoicing in it. And then there's a story about Peter when he comes to the end of his life, as we kind of heard at the end of the gospel. When you grow old, you'll stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you. There's a story that goes in the tradition, it's not in the Gospels anywhere, but that things were getting a little hairy in Rome, and so Peter was skipping town. And as he's going away from Rome, he sees a vision of Christ walking towards Rome with the cross. And he famously says in Latin, "Domine, quo vadis?" Quo vadimus, where are we going? Domine, Lord, where are you going? And Jesus tells him, "I'm going to Rome to be crucified again." So Peter summons his courage and goes back to Rome and is crucified, just like his Lord. But he says before he's crucified, "Can you crucify me upside down because I'm not worthy to suffer in the same manner as my Lord was?" Quo vadimus, quo vadis? Where are we going? Where are you going? It's so easy to want to walk back to the nets that we had in a previous life. It's so scary to think about what following Christ might mean after we leave these doors and maybe try to evangelize in the world. But it's a question worthwhile to continue asking ourselves, where am I going? Am I going back to the same vices? Or this time, am I really willing and able to follow the Lord, even to Rome?